Hi everyone. Such a great, I guess, afternoon. I wanted to come to you to talk about let's start it off with talking about Scarlett Johansson. I'm at my office and that I rarely use. I come once a day, once a week to do the recording for Nerdorama, and so I'm sitting here waiting. I'm working a little bit until Nerdorama starts. Okay, so in the meantime, let's talk about Scarlett Johansson and Black Widow. So last week it came out. Okay, so we don't know when last week is. So it's the end of July of 2021. We all were notified that Scarlett Johansson, and it seems a little tone deaf. So people are not necessarily not knowing what side to take in regards to this because we're still in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And let's keep it real. I am not sure if movie theaters are going to be open in another month. Or we're going to get maybe even more stricter regulations that's going to take out. I am still unconvinced that we're going to be open, that we're going to um, not have some level of shutdown, even though the other half of me is like, I'm not sure capitalists are willing to go into another Christmas season with a complete shutdown. But it is edging that way. With all that being said, and this week, schools are open. San Bernardino County in California, schools open this week. So, anywho, I say all that to say, people aren't going to the movies as much. And in 2021, the biggest movie that has been in movie theaters is Black Widow. Okay, so let me pause and say that Black Widow is a good movie. I like Black Widow a lot. So there's two issues that's taking place. Number one, Black Widow is a really good movie. One of the problems though that I had about Black Widow is this. Why put out a Black Widow movie after Black Widow is dead? So I realize, because I have read the comic, so don't start like this is the creation of Black Widow, of explaining to us Black Widow, because Black Widow itself is just a label to the Scarlett Johansson's character. It's Scarlett Johansson is just a representation of many different Black Widows. But what we discover from that movie is yes and no. There is a moment that we had where we understood that Scarlett Johansson, what made her unique is that she was able, even though she was created this way, manufactured this way, and Black Widow puts us right in the setting of the Cold War in regards to how the USSR, former USSR, had many different spies. USSR and Germany had Nazi sympathizers and former Nazis were hiding under alias names in United States. First of all, that is not a far-fetched idea. Not only is it not a far-fetched idea, it is absolutely 10 times truth. In fact, NASA would not be what it is. In fact, a lot of science as a whole, science technology would not be what it is. The H bomb would not have been developed. I mean, so we can go down this list, and there's a really great show called The Devil That Lives Next Door, and I've mentioned it on this show. I've mentioned it on my channel. It is on Netflix, and I think, is it, and there's a show um about the moon. I can't think of the name of it. It's on Apple TV. So this is not, but The Devil Next Door is an actual documentary. And but there's all these other shows that are beginning to finally tell the story of how America helped save and protect Nazis. By the way, when Israel became a state, one of the first things that Israel decided to do was they wanted every country to turn over Nazis to Israel, and they were going to prosecute. The irony is that America would turn over if somebody found out that they existed, but they kept secret records on certain people, especially those who were really important to the NASA program and military research programs. So therefore, America's complicit in maintaining. I digressed. The point that is part of the story of Black Widow. Now, she had a heart. She was able to kind of get out of this environment and become eventually an Avenger, amend herself and stuff like that. But her way of getting out is very similar to other people who were getting out and trying to find a different way, who were abandoning the USSR. By the way, put another pause in this. The Olympians. So every 4 years we have the Olympics. Well, every 2 years actually, winter and summer. And every time somebody from one of the former USSR countries defects, sometimes it's not even there. Sometimes it's from one of the Middle Eastern countries too. They defect and they say, well, I'm not going back. I'm going to die. And blah, blah, blah. That happened again in Bosnia. She refused to get back on the plane. They sent her home early. She refused to get back on the plane. And because this is a really good time to defect, by the way. Anywho, again, all of these are really complicated issues. And I think that it does begin. I love how comics have these sophisticated stories that's rooted in real history and real time periods. So that's pretty cool for me. And I really enjoy that and I appreciate that. But that's neither here nor there. The problem that I'm having, at the end of the day, we do know there's something special about the Scarlett Johansson character, Black Widow. We do know that she's dead. And I felt that we don't need a movie about a dead character. I mean, and I'm going to stand firm on this. So the reason why on Nerdorama I ate crow, because I was like, there is no way that Feige is going to create this whole story for a woman who's dead. So there has to be, and they're like, well, it's a passing of the torch. I didn't get passing of the torch. I got another layer, and then when you combine Loki, I feel like Black Widow is not dead. And in fact, Black Widow, in my mind, should come back in Hawkeye. And Black Widow, I'm still standing firm. Black Widow was still not dead. She still can come back. I mean, the only thing that we really learned from Black Widow movie is that she was the one who came up, who got the plane. Because really, this movie takes place in between Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. Those are where this is the time period that this takes place. So it's a really tight time period that this takes place. And I was like, oh, so she's the one who had the plane. And now I have even more kind of questions like, so how did she hook up with Steve Rogers? Like, did Steve Rogers stay in, where did Steve Rogers stay in Wakanda a little longer? Like, how did all this happen? But I'm not sure if I mean, I would like to know, but I'm not sure if that like matters. So, Scarlett Johansson, we found out, well, first off, Disney released the numbers of how much they made that weekend. And then they turned around and Disney released the numbers that how much they made on Disney Plus. And it's the first time that Disney released Disney Plus numbers. Um and it was a considerable sum. Was it $1 billion movie? Like it would have been. I mean, I know that people said there's no guarantee, and it's true. There is no guarantee on how much money a movie is going to make, but let's keep it real. Captain Marvel made $1 billion. Infinity War made $1 billion. Lion King made $1 billion. If it didn't make $1 billion, it was very close to $1 billion. And Endgame made more than $1 billion. Spider-Man made $1 billion when it came out afterwards, and this was going to be the next movie after. It would have made $1 billion because no one was getting tired of this, and people were extremely anxious to see Iron Man's dead. What's next? Right? And is Iron Man really dead? Like, we were anxious and waiting for more Marvel content. And then when you see all these other really bad movies, you want it makes the desire to have Marvel even higher because this crap that they're coming out with is really crap. So that's where I'm at. Now, with all that being said, with all that being said, like I said, the movie's still good. The movie is still irrelevant, to be honest. And I think one of the more disappointing things about the movie is that there's no Hawkeye. And it's strange to have Black Widow with no Hawkeye, in my opinion. Okay, last but not least, why? Is because they're so together. They've been together for so long. And to see that we don't even have a movie, we don't even have the touch point as to how they hooked up. And it's disappointing to see that there's no touch point in this Black Widow movie with Hawkeye. And it's like, why would that not happen? And then we also need to move on to another phase of this story. And that's part one. Was the movie relevant? At this point, I'd say no. Maybe it could have been, but it is still the most money-making movie of the year thus far. And if we have more movies coming out, if the movies stay open, I guarantee Shanghai and I guarantee the Avenger, like Marvel, is going to reign just like they did last year and the year before with the most money-making movies, period. Like, I mean, because, and what people are beginning to realize is that it is not just comic book movies. They actually have really good stories. And that's the reason why people are coming, because look at Suicide Squad. You can't just throw comic book characters in films. It has to have a good story. So, pause that there. And let's take it all back to making money, right? So, it used to be that actor makes a film or a TV show and you get paid. That's how it is, right? Get paid. And then what sucked is that people were able to take this said product and have it in syndication. And the people who would get paid for syndication are the people who own the product and not the actors. So actors began to kind of like push back and talk to their union. And it was like, this is not fair, because how is it that Joe Schmo, who owned it, is able to consistently make money on it? Like, for example, but this is not a good example because she owned it, Lucy, right? I Love Lucy. I don't think I Love Lucy has ever been off the air since the 50s. So the fact that, and I think it's only like 3 or 4, I don't even think it's 4 seasons. I think it's like 3 seasons. And it has never left the air. Golden Girls, my show, since the 80s, has never left the air. They should be getting a check because now we know that Lucy was clearly the brains behind Desi and Lucy, right? And I say that because Lucy was the one who, Lucy not only owned her content, but she also is the first woman to own a studio, which is now the Desilu production is Paramount Studios. So she's the one who said yes to Star Wars, just to give you some perspective of and owning and putting that out. So the point is, with all of that, she doesn't own Star Wars, but she put it out and she did production. Anyway, the point is this. So now actors get not only money for performing, but they get residuals, right? And then there's something called streaming, and then they call it like new media. And it's like, well, this is suspicious, right? So who should get paid for if they pick up my show, not on a network, but it's also on a streaming service? Like, actors don't get paid for that. And then we saw most recently Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle got up and did like 8 minutes about talking about how he feels bad that they sold his the Chappelle show, and nobody talked to him, and people are making money off of his content. Netflix was like, he tried to make good with these people. Nobody wanted to make good with him. So he talked to Netflix, and Netflix is like, Dave, we're going to take it down on your behalf until they make you good. And then Comedy Central made him good. I think it's Viacom. And now the show is back. So that set the precedent for all of these other actors and creators, that all of them are going to start getting paid on the streaming, right? So now we're there. This is the same thing that happened with music. This is the same thing that has happened with YouTube back in the day. And profit sharing notion. At first it was just like, oh, this is just free, and then they began to be like, okay, no, YouTube is making all this money off of us. So people, it's the same thing that I said, that's what happened with music, with Napster. And at first, music industry didn't want to give creators a dime, and then that had to relinquish. So this has happened. And then something came along called Mission Impossible. And what what he did, Tom Cruise, it's not the first time that someone, an actor or actress, put forth their money into a project that they really love. He's not the first one. But what he decided to do was like, okay, so you guys can't pay me. And clearly, this is, somebody else. this was somebody else's project, and he at the position that Mission Impossible came out. I mean, Tom Cruise was famous and had money, but if you ever watched Mission Impossible, it costs a lot of money to make that stuff. So he's like, let's just see if this works. He had the vision to believe that it was going to be super, super big, and he was right. And so they said, okay, look, he made a deal that literally changed the lives of actors. He's like, look, pay me on the back end. So I get a percentage, but he did something, even one of the better deals. I get a percentage of every ticket sold, every DVD. Well, there were no DVDs at the time, but every VHS tape, and then eventually DVD. I get a percent of. I mean, he made it, and the thing is that he made it in a way where it didn't seem like a lot, but and it wasn't a lot. But what he did was he took a gamble. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't a big percent. It wasn't like he asked for half. It was just like it was. I think it was like a. I mean, it was a fraction. Like, it was such a small amount. And so, of course, they're like, sure, this seems like a great deal. But here's the thing. It made big. It hit big. And it made him, at the time, the highest check that anyone has ever gotten from a film. And he set the precedent. He set the tone. And many more actors began to start making this deal, who were big name actors. They began to make a deal. We're saying, especially if it was a big budget film like Mission Impossible, then but it also can sometimes work really well for the the company, because people are taking large gambles and you don't know if it's going to work or if it's not going to work. And so you may not have to pay $50 million to Joe Splo, right? Because it didn't hit. So this is the kind of deal that Scarlett Johansson had with Black Widow. And she got a percentage of every ticket sold, and then she gets bonuses and blah, blah, blah. Problem was this. In her deal, she doesn't get a percent of every stream sold. This new thing that people were paying to get access to something. She didn't get a percent of that. And so I felt that the movie should have dropped last year. And I think the movie should have dropped at least around Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think it would have been a better thing for it to have dropped before Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Not after, but fine again. But clearly there had been some talks behind the scenes. And the talk is this. And this is my assumption. The talks have to be about, look, I'm dead. And you need to do something because I'm dead. So this may be my biggest payday at the end of this. And so therefore, since I may not get another check, you need to, this is, we can't, I'm sorry, I'm thirsty. You can't release this movie and this needs to go straight to movie theater. When in fact, I really think what would have been better for her, and I don't know if they tried, is to say, okay, look, let's go ahead and release this to streaming. And I think she should have released it to streaming last year. And I get a percent of every stream. I think it would have been a bigger hit. But she waited she took a gamble. I don't think it was a good gamble to wait until now and till the movie theater open. And the problem is that people aren't running to the movies. And her argument is that Disney should not have released it simultaneously. And the reason why I think they did it simultaneously is to avoid pirating. And you can avoid pirating in another way, but I think they also made it think about it in this way, is that I own Black Widow and I also went to the movies. There are some movies that you do want to enjoy in the big screen because it is, and I only would do Adobe, and I still feel like movie theaters should now come in a Dolby setting in IMAX. Nobody wants to see regular digital because there's nothing special. I think there is something to seeing her in Dolby that is more special than seeing it on TV or iPad or whatever. And so there's that. But at the end of the day, I think that uh, I'm going to take at first when I saw it, I thought, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Because making a lawsuit against Disney and then Disney's retort against her was pretty strong. And then they released the numbers right before the lawsuit. Because really this is a $50 million, in her estimate, she's missing $50 million. But I could push back and say, well, Disney's missing $1 billion because or what, 700 million, because Marvel movies in the last 3 years has been averaging between 800 million to over $1 billion. So they're missing money too. So we all missing money. So what you're doing here, sweetie, is you rolled the dice and you lost. So I don't see how this is. I don't see how your argument is resonating. But I'm gonna flip it on the other side. She has support. And this is where, because the next day people are like, oh, there are going to be some other people who are thinking of suing some other women. And I was like, suing Disney. I was like, oh. And then Disney got quiet. Because in this age of hashtag Me Too movement, there are a number of people who pay inequality amongst men and women, because none of the men are suing. So the Rock with Jungle Cruise, and I told you about Jungle Cruise. The Rock with Jungle Cruise he's not suing, but Emma is suing, and that is a telltale of the fact that, and then you have and then the woman who did 101 Dalmatians. They have good points, but what I think this is going to do, number one, is that contracts are going to change. They should get a piece of the money from, if you have to buy for the premium, you have to buy the movie, you should get it's almost like a DVD sale. You should be able to get a piece of that. So therefore I'm for. But number two, I don't think that Scarlett Johansson is out of Marvel. And I say that because Feige is supporting her. And to say that he just supports all his actors, that's not necessarily true. I think we're going to see her in other films, and they will come up. I would like to see her in Hawkeye. I think that she will come back. I don't think that she's been completely replaced. I think that this is going to settle. I don't think this is going to court. I don't think Disney wants to continue to fight because at the moment there is no Disney film, zero Disney film that is doing better than a Marvel Disney film. And so Disney needs Fivey. Fivey doesn't need Disney. And that just is what it is. Anybody would pick up anybody, DC would love to have him on their team. And that's just is what it is. If he is the monster in the room that could this is what they call the gorilla, the 1,000-pound gorilla. He is the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room that can tip the balance to say, Disney, make it right. They'll settle, and we're going to see her coming back. And I think that's what this is about. It's going to be Disney, make it right. So I've talked too long. I'm going to have to come back, and I should have done it in this color. So I'm going to try to make it color coordinate again and do Nas, because Nas's album dropped and I'm in love. See you next time.